What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Joe Nissim, and with me, as always, is my main man, Mr. David Fuchs.
What's up, Joe? What up?
We are both traveling this week, but we're still dedicated to the show. CFP Talks goes no matter what. Wherever we go, we bring our computers.
It's funny you say we're traveling this week, making it seem like you're in San Francisco and I'm in Paris.
I love it.
If you're watching on YouTube, obviously if you're listening on Spotify, my background is the Eiffel Tower, Joe's is the Golden Gate Bridge.
But somehow we're still both in New Jersey.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So I'm obviously out of LA this week, traveling in New Jersey, visiting some family, going to a wedding of an old buddy. But David and I were actually planning to kind of do this one in person. Timing didn't work out. David's with his family as well, but I'm so glad that we were able to do it. But I wanted
Definitely.
to kind of talk about something really interesting here, which is some of the feedback that I've been getting lately. And I was really happy when this topic came up and you put it into our show notes, David, is the concept of seven being better than 10, especially in the CFP world. Um, because here's the feedback that I've been getting. And the feedback is I went and took the CFP in July. I studied so much of the hard stuff. It took me days to learn what a like kind exchange is. It took me forever to figure out the differences between A, B, and C trust. It took me forever to figure out how a GRAT or a CRAT works. It took me for, and obviously insert whatever topic you want that are very difficult topics that people tend to get stuck on. And then and this was just like a heartbreaking piece of information. I went into the test and there was a lot of easy questions and I could not remember the answer.
And on what topics that they didn't necessarily study as much because they spent a
Or
lot of their
or
time trying to
or at
trying
all.
to or at all. But the reason is they spent more time trying to nail down those really complex estate planning or tax planning questions that when they got to some of these really easy questions, like maybe how to solve for a Sharpe ratio or whatever,
Right.
they or a GPP question, they were pretty much like, I didn't know how to do that because I spent all my time or most of my time on the extremely difficult mastery level questions.
Correct. And not only did they not see those questions, but the questions that they got wrong. And it again, it hurts to hear it because people are sitting there kind of going, I can't believe I didn't know the difference between chapter 7 and 11. I can't believe I didn't know what the limit is if your credit card gets stolen. I can't believe I didn't remember what a simple IRA, how a simple IRA works, or how the matching on a simple IRA works. And you're sitting there going, "Oh man, like some of that stuff is not overly difficult, but you see a lot of people that they start to kind of you start spreading yourself so thin that your natural way of doing it is I'm going to know the really really hard stuff really really well and I'm going to forget about everything else. And this is something that we talked about in the last cycle that was actually one of our most watched videos on why 7 is better than 10. And when you're going to study, it's kind of heartbreaking to go in there and go, I don't know the difference between 7 and imagine getting something you didn't review or you reviewed kind of mediocre, right? Because again, even if you're doing your flashcards, you're like, I kind of remember this, but I don't. And then I spent all my time on this one thing and I can't believe I did it. And then I got four questions in a row on time value of money with NPV, which I reviewed a little bit, but I didn't review a lot. And I think we all get very, very consumed with that hard stuff.
I Here's another downfall, okay, of doing it that way. And listen, like that's a totally I think that that is a completely reasonable way to study. If you're not getting guidance from someone like Joe or someone that's an expert in these exams, where are most people gonna what were you about to jump in?
No, or from the show.
Well, Joe or from the show, but it's reasonable. I mean, like most people, if you ask them like where do you spend most of your time, they'll be like, well, I really need to spend a lot of time on estate planning or tax planning or insurance planning or some of the really hard topics. Here's where I think you can get into a lot of trouble. Aside from everything that Joe just said, you're number one, you're neglecting the really easy questions. And we'll do an episode on this probably in a few weeks on the 20-60-20 rule, which you'll hear about. But those 20% easy layup questions that are low-hanging fruits, like you need to nail those. So if you're not spending time on those because you're spending more time on the more difficult stuff, you're now costing yourself a lot of very easy, low-hanging fruit points. Here's where it could be a double-edged sword and fuck you on both sides. Not only are you neglecting those questions and those topics, but there's no guarantee that you're also going to get the hard ones right too.
Right.
Because those ones are mastery level questions. And yes, you could spend all the time in the world on those topics, complicated, sophisticated estate planning, etc. There's no like guarantee you're going to get those right. I think you're better off mastering or putting time in with the easier ones because those are layups.
Right.
These ones you could put the time in and still get them wrong.
Right. And I think you're hitting on something. I think it's we're better served saving that for the 20-60-20 rule. But I think the point that you're driving home is it's easy, David, to just go, this is easy. I don't have to look at it. Versus
Totally.
going, this is easy. I better know this because if I get a question on this, I want to know this inside out, upside down. Because the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to those easy topics is to underestimate them. I know what Chapter 7 bankruptcy is, right? It's, and then you go, it's, crap. You need to know that inside out as to what assets or that are untouchable. You need to know what liabilities can get negotiated versus which ones are never released and the time frames around them. Because again, you look at an easy topic and you go, I know it. I don't, or I do this at work all the time, so I don't really need to touch it, or I'm gonna review it a little bit. And it's such a kind of mind fuck to think about it that way, that like, why am I studying the easy stuff more versus and the harder stuff less? Again, we'll save a little bit more of that for the 20-60-20 episode. But the point of today is to understand that you can spend your time on three really hard topics and do seven stuff mediocre, or you can take seven things. Don't try to know everything because this exam is too big. So if you're looking at 10 topics, pick the seven of them that you're most comfortable with. And I'm going to tell you, this is opposite of what everybody's going to tell you. The seven that you're most comfortable with, double the fuck down on. The three that you're not comfortable with, leave those to the end. Because if you know seven things really well, they can test you on it any which way. They can turn it, they can spin it, they can change the wording, but you know that inside out. And use the path of least resistance. If those are things that you're more comfortable with, you're more familiar with, know every angle and every piece of it versus saying, well, I got to split my time with those three harder topics, so now I'm not going to know those seven things as well. I'm going to try to know all of it, but at this level. Take seven and know it at this level. And if you're listening on Spotify, I'm going full Jersey, use my hands to talk. Know it really well inside out. However, those other three things, leave them. Who cares? And I know that's a scary proposition. But at the end of the day, if you know those seven things really well and you're being questioned, you get 3 or 4 questions in a row on them, you just banked 3 or 4 questions on a topic And if there's one of those questions that come from that three topics, who cares? Get it wrong. Even if you guess, you might end up getting it right. But that is once you come to that realization, and again, I know it's scary to think that there's three topics that I may not cover or may not cover well because I'm sacrificing that time to know something really, really well. And I think that's one of the hardest things for students to wrap their mind around because David, you remember that mode where I'm like, I just need to keep going. I need to keep going. I need to get everything. I need to get everything. I need to check every box. All right. Like full on test anxiety, test review book this thick. I got to cover every page.
Hmm.
I'd rather you did it.
Yeah, and I think one of the points you made probably at this point 3 minutes ago in this Joe monologue, but um the it's easy to be like, oh, this rule for GPP or an easy math question that you think you know really well, or a definition chat about bankruptcy, whatever. It's easy to look at it and say, oh, I know that. I don't really have to look at that because, and I will tell you firsthand, I would do that sometimes, and this is not something that I would go back and do again. It ended up working out, but I wouldn't suggest doing it. I would do that. I kind of did that too. And I did end up getting fucked on a couple questions on the CFP. I can remember them vividly, but where I would pick up the flashcard or I'd read a note that I took and I would say, "Oh, I know that. I don't really have to go back and look at that again because I have that down cold." That's a huge trap and mistake that you're going to fall into that will end up probably costing you a question or two.
Yeah. And especially when you're tired, right? Especially and that's like a perfect I'm tired, it's Tuesday night. I don't want to be doing flashcards. Right? And I always think it's kind of like every time that somebody does something stupid, they go, I skipped something that was so basic and so easy, and I didn't do it, and I don't know why I didn't do it. Like I went
No,
to
it's because they were tired or lazy, or again, you got like cocky and you're just like, oh, you know what? Like, I don't need to take the extra 45 seconds to a minute to actually make sure I know that because I know it. I know it. Okay, quote. Like, I think I know it. You may know it, but you may also not know it. And that again, 45 seconds to a minute. Like if you're on the exam and you're gonna like get a question wrong and you're gonna look back on it and be like, fuck, I should have just spent the extra literally minute to 2 minutes to just learn that or make sure I knew that easy topic. Again, don't let it come back and bite you in the ass. I dropped a lot of curses in this episode. Um, don't let it come back and bite you for a minute or 2 minutes of sacrifice at that time.
and sometimes it's hard to realize it's that little thing. And again, on the surface, it doesn't seem like that little thing will affect your test performance. But oftentimes, it's the little things are the reason you didn't pass. If you're flipping a flashcard and you're not saying 80% or 90% what's on the back of that flashcard, you don't know it.
Yeah.
Right? And tell me if this was you or when you did flashcards, you flip it and you go, I knew that. But you didn't say it. So you really don't know it. But you're like, I knew that. So you kind of like, oh, I'm gonna put this in my no pile. I'm not gonna come back and review because I actually did know that. Well, no, that doesn't mean that you know that until you can recall it at the point where it's proper. This is the hard part. This is the repetition that's the hard part. If you keep going through it and you're not getting it, keep putting it in your don't know pile until you're getting 80 to 90% on what's the back of that flashcard. So, I mean, we're talking about these little things that make a big difference on the exam. Because
Hmm.
if you don't have that discipline to say, just because you're reading it and you're going, oh, I knew that, you didn't say it. And if you can't say it, then you really don't know it. And having that line in the sand of not letting yourself off the hook is going to be really, really important. because that's those are the seven topics that you know really well. And you're kind of going through and you're going, I know it, I know it, I know it, I know it. And instead of being, we want, when we say you know it, I want you know it to be like an eight or
Cold,
nine out of 10.
cold,
Do you know what I mean? Like
at least an eight
eight,
and a half.
9 or 10 at 10, that's where you want to live. If that's at a 7.8, that's not an eight.
Right. No, 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 no.
No, no.
I even think you like for those low hanging fruits, and we're talking about the easy questions, you got to know those at an eight and a half or above. I'm not even comfortable with an eight.
I mean, we can, and I would say closer to the exam, absolutely. But and we can argue about those numbers, but I'll say you got to know it really well. If you're flipping the card and there's three sentences on the back of the card, and you knew one of those three, you don't know that card. If you know two out of three, you don't know that card. If and that is a very, very hard mental thing to get over because you're like, it's good enough. Not for this test. It's
Yeah,
not good enough.
right.
It's not good enough. And that is the level that you have to know it. You got to know that those seven things. If I and this is kind of, the thing that I've said in class. If I were to wake you up out of a dead cold sleep and I shook you and I said, "Tell me what the rule on bankruptcy is." I want you to go, "Huh," and be able to tell me right away. Hmm. And if you can't do that, then I'm sorry, then you don't know it because you need to be able to recognize it and recall it immediately and this is what's important for the exam. And we'll wrap up after this, David, because I know David's giving me the what is that? The red light? You're giving me the red light.
I'm like, yo, we got to hit a commercial, dude.
That's it. We got a commercial break. Is remember how exhausting questions 100 through 170 are. Think about if you have to work that hard to get an answer on questions 1 through 40, how tired you are in question 100 and how tired you are at 140, and then you're exhausted by 170. Make your life easier. The less hard you have to work, especially on those easy questions, the better off you are, even with your exam stamina. So, as always, everybody, we hope that you found this information helpful. With any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to David or myself, and we will see you guys on the next episode.